For New Year's, Sveta and her fiancé Pashka decided to spend time in a secluded rural area. However, Sveta couldn't fathom where Pashka got such a strange idea. Before she could even blink, Pashka was already calling friends, inviting them to join them out of town. In such a situation, it was pointless to object, and Sveta acquiesced, although deep down she would have preferred a quiet celebration, just the two of them, without any outsiders. Sveta knew that Pashka had a house in the village, but had never visited it. She recalled an old unpleasant story of legal disputes after the death of Pashka's grandmother, when the rights to the house were divided among 6 participants in the court case. "They're still in court," remarked Pashka, upon hearing mention of the family discord. "But what can we do now? We have the key, and in winter, there's nobody there anyway." But everything was fine until the idea involved everyone. Upon arrival in the village, the young people heard shouts from the house. 2 of Pashka's aunts had started arguing whether aspic should be on the New Year's table. Meanwhile, the husbands were discussing when would be the best time to go fishing at the local lake. They had hoped to spend New Year's in seclusion. Pashka refused to return to the city, and the invited friends had to wait for him. In the end, there were 13 people at the table, including annoyed friends who didn't know what to expect in the midst of unfamiliar and tense atmosphere. The 13th numbered a foreboding sign, permeating the air with mysterious vibrations, like ghosts ready to envelop everything around with their influence. Even the conversation at the table, arising from this number, became a reflection of internal contradictions. Aunt Faina, skeptically inclined towards superstitions, expressed the idea that 13 is a number only for guests, and the hosts can stay aside. But this idea only fueled the flames of discord, as disputes over the right to the house had not yet been resolved. While the aunts argued, the men preferred to remain silent, agreeing that without the 14th guest, the holiday was doomed to failure. With only an hour left before New Year's, it was spent in desperate searches for another guest. But alas, all acquaintances and relatives living nearby politely declined to join the celebration, citing the need to spend time with their families. At the same time, 2 of Pasha's invited friends, feeling that the evening was not going well, decided to leave, even if they had to meet the new year on the road. "I'm tired of all this," Ronka muttered as he sat behind the wheel, and Danko silently followed him. There was no farewell. Almost immediately after their departure, Uncle Gleb brought 2 local drunks, as if chosen out of nowhere. Their presence at the table only brought additional unpleasantness, but no one dared to kick them out. Again, 13. Again, discord, and it was almost midnight. The look on Sveta, suddenly seized by the desire to leave, spoke for itself. The new year began not as planned. The sounds of crunching snow on the path reached Sveta's ears before she spotted the silhouette of the old man in a short artificial fur coat, fur hat, and felt boots. Passing by, the old man gave a slight nod without interrupting his stride. "Happy New Year!" exclaimed Sveta, suddenly realizing that just minutes before midnight, only a lonely figure could be wandering the village streets, and one more guest was needed at the table to make everyone feel at ease. Offering to spend New Year's Eve together with the old man, Sveta paused to see his reaction. The old man stood still for a moment, and then headed towards her. He didn't introduce himself or say a word, which made Sveta think that this stranger who happened to cross her path was a silent type. Aunt Alia wrinkled her nose disapprovingly. Aunt Nina remarked that only homeless people were missing in the house for complete happiness. The men were relieved, thinking the problem was solved. Pashka poured glasses for his bride, the old man, and filled them with champagne. Sounds of boom, 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 and the anthem echoed from the TV. Sveta was used to everyone exchanging congratulations, expressing good wishes, and making loud toasts at this solemn moment. But another scandal erupted at the table over a Bengal candle above the Olivier salad plate. This New Year's Eve became one of the most dreadful in Sveta's memory. The drunkards were given a bottle of vodka and kicked out onto the street. The 14th old man was also asked to leave, with advice to wash up before entering the house. Sveta felt ashamed of Pashka's relatives' behavior, their lack of restraint, and for thoughtlessly dragging a stranger into this mess where he was unfairly offended. Apologizing to the silent old man, Sveta offered to walk him home. Pashka decided to join her, Sonia with Dimka and Natasha, with Vedic also decided to join them, because staying in the same house with Pashka's shouting relatives was unbearable. Nobody felt like talking, and what was there to talk about anyway, when the most important holiday of the year turned out to be spoiled? Seeing the old man off to his house at the end of the street, Sveta and Pashka apologized to him again, and he simply crossed them one by one and left, closing the gate behind him. Dimka, due to health problems, didn't drink, so the invited friends decided to leave after all. New Year had already arrived, and they didn't want to stay in this inhospitable house longer than necessary. How could Pashka have known it would turn out like this? The friends said warm goodbyes, congratulated Sveta and Pavel once again, and headed back to the city, leaving the young ones to endure drunken arguments until morning, which started with talk about Olivier salad and smelly drunkards and ended with dividing up the house. Pashka was, of course, displeased with the whole situation. He grumbled that they should have immediately returned to the city and welcomed the new year at home. But what was the point of shaking fists after a fight? At least he had only a few sips of champagne during the holiday, so he was completely sober and ready to drive by morning. Give those gloves to that tramp. It stinks here. Aunt Nina handed Sveta old gloves as a farewell gift, which the elusive 14th guest had forgotten. They had to drive in the opposite direction from leaving the village to return the old man's belongings. Who knows, maybe those were his only gloves. He probably wouldn't have come back for them himself, given how poorly he was treated at the house. Sveta vividly remembered that the old man's house was the third one from the store. 2 houses with new fences, an empty lot, and then his decrepit hut. But there was no house there anymore, just ruins without glass or a roof, 3 walls, and behind them, dense thickets, which were probably once a garden. The store was closed, which was not surprising for January 1st in the village. A middle-aged woman peeked out of the window of one of the neighboring houses, to whom Pavel and Sveta described the old man, and said he lived somewhere around here. The woman just shook her head. She didn't know anyone like that. Well, you couldn't knock on every window and door in a row. People were resting after the holiday, so the gloves were left on one of the window sills of the dilapidated, long-abandoned house. They say how you spend New Year's Eve is how you'll spend the rest of the year, but it turned out differently for everyone. A lot happened. Sveta and Pavel got married in the spring. Aunt Nina had a heart attack shortly before that, even though she had never complained about her heart before. Her husband, Glub, drank so much that he ended up in the hospital with delirium tremens. Aunt Eliana and Mikhail argued until they got divorced and went to court over the property they had acquired together. Cousin Faina got hit by a car. She survived but was left disabled, and the village house burned down even before the snow melted. It was caused by a short circuit, but it seemed strange because the house had been vacant since New Year's, locked up, and the disgruntled heirs had thoughtfully removed the fuses. Once Pashka blurted out that it was the ghost of that old man from the ruins who punished his relatives for the offense. He laughed it off, but Sveta felt uneasy. What if she really did invite a ghost to the festive table back then? After all, he crossed everyone who saw him off, but he only glanced angrily at Pashka's relatives who remained in the house. And, most importantly, all the guys remembered the old man's house and fence with the gate so well. But there was neither a fence, nor a gate, nor a house there anymore. Just ruins. After that, you couldn't believe that all this mysticism was drawn to superstitious people by itself. And more often than not, it wasn't for the better.